Let's talk about a gentleman named Sawyer Gipson-Long. Up next on Fantasy Baseball Today in 5. Welcome into FBT in 5 on Monday, September 18th. I am Frank Samfeld, joined by Scott White. And let's talk about Sawyer Gipson-Long. He is a starting pitcher with the Tigers, and he had a great start at the Angels this weekend. 5 innings, 1 run allowed, 11 strikeouts, 23 swinging strikes on 82 pitches. Scott, is there any chance that we could start Sawyer Gipson-Long at the Oakland A's this week?
There's a chance. There's a chance. That's a really favorable matchup. And then the following week, he gets the Royals. So 2 really favorable matchups. In each of the last 2 weeks. It's gutsy. It's gutsy. He wasn't a high-profile prospect when he got called up. This is his second turn. He did, however, have some interesting numbers in the minors. Did Sawyer Gipson-Long, a 4.33 ERA, 113 WHIP, 11.4 K per 9 versus just 2.6 BB per 9. So why was the ERA over 4? A lot of home runs. I think that kind of puts Gipson-Long in the same categories like a Joe Ryan or an Andrew Abbott, where, okay, big strikeout potential despite kind of a modest fastball velocity, but then the home runs are the other side of the coin where, it could inflate his ERA. It could turn into some really good outings like he just showed Saturday, but also maybe some really bad outings. So it's a big gamble. It's a gamble I think I'd be willing to take in a deep league, 15 teams or more, or certainly like an AL-only league. I think Sawyer Gipson-Long could be a godsend in that format because there's just nothing else on the waivers wire like him. But in standard-sized leagues, 12 teams or shallower, I think you probably don't need to roll the dice on Sawyer Gipson-Long.
All right, would you take Sawyer Gipson-Long over any of these pitchers? I'll give you the name and the matchup for this week. Gavin Williams is home against the Orioles. Jose Quintana is at the Phillies. Ranger Suarez is home against the Mets. And Bailey Ober, who returns to the Twins rotation, is at the Reds. Would you take Gipson-Long over any of those names?
Look, for just this week, maybe he's at the top of the list. I might put Gavin Williams ahead of him because there's a lot of upside. I know on the full-length podcast, I put Quintana over him too. I was thinking the next 2 weeks. I know Quintana's matchups the final week of the season is really good, so maybe. So I don't know that I necessarily drop Quintana to pick up Sawyer Gipson-Long. Certainly, you'd need to be in a position where you're going to start Gipson-Long, and as I said, most people probably aren't in that position. But he's on the higher end of the list for sure.
All right, let's talk about the big news from the weekend. No surprise, but Shohei Ohtani has been shut down for the remainder of this season. He was placed on the IL with an oblique strain. We know that he was diagnosed with a torn UCL in his right elbow as well, Scott. I guess kind of looking forward to next season. What do you think of with Shohei Ohtani? Obviously, he's going to have some kind of elbow surgery. We don't know exactly what kind it's going to be yet. But what is like your early prognosis for Ohtani's 2024 value?
Yeah, I mean, we got to find out what it is. I think I still expect him to have Tommy John surgery is what I'm thinking now. And, if he's on Bryce Harper's timetable, then maybe he does make it back for opening day as a hitter. Obviously, has Tommy John surgery, all of next year's off the table for pitching. But as a hitter, maybe he can be ready for opening day. It would be a stretch. And, even with Harper, it really took a few months before we saw the power return to Harper levels. So I want to count on Ohtani being ready for opening day. I want to count on him being quite himself, even if he is. And for that reason, I don't expect to draft him, at least myself, in round 1 next year.
Again, that is Shohei Ohtani done for the remainder of this season. The other big news from this weekend, Ronald Acuña has missed 2 straight games with right calf tightness. Seems like the Braves have been playing it safe here. They obviously have already clinched the division, the National League East, and they have a 4.5 game lead over the Dodgers for the number 1 seed overall in the National League. So I think that might play into some of their decision-making, Scott, but for people still setting lineups, what are you doing with Ronald Acuña?
Probably starting him. with the idea that half a week of Acuña is better than a full week of anyone you could slot in to replace him. There's a chance they just sit him all week. I mean, yes, they are competing for the number 1 seed still. They're probably, if they don't get the number 1, they'll get the number 2 and they'll have a bye either way. That seems like the more important thing. And with calf injuries, you have to be careful. I mean, if he aggravates it and it turns into a more of a true strain, we might not see Acuña for the entire playoffs, and that would be a disaster for the Braves. So I don't think the gain of bringing him back early is worth the risk in their scenario. But I do think there's a good chance he's back before the end of the week still.
Again, that is Ronald Acuña. We are going to wrap there. For more extensive fantasy baseball coverage, listen to the Fantasy Baseball Today podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the Audacy app, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Thanks for listening to Fantasy Baseball Today in 5, and we'll be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.